share family stories. That's right. If you take the 12 noon, you're back here 10 till 1 o'clock. 50 to 55 minute tour. Yes, sir. Every half hour. Yes, sir.
What time is it?
At the window? We are in take quarters today, so we do ask that you silence electronic devices and not answer telephone calls along the room. Feel free to converse, but don't speak so loudly that the folks around you can't hear the narration, okay? Any questions before we get started today? No one wants the federal building. This is the original federal building built for Anchorage. It's now part of the visitor center. They have free movies as well as free exhibits that are all about Alaskan history and Alaskan animals. They're very well done presentations. It is still a federal building, so you have to have an ID to get in, but it is worth the pat down. I promise you the exhibits are very well done. To your right hand side is Historic City Hall. Built in 1936, this was the very first two-story building, as well as the first cement building built here in downtown. At one point, it held all the governmental offices, the fire department, the police department, the post office, the mayor's office, 3 jail cells, and of course 1 drunk tank. So very happening place back in the early days. Now, if you're looking for a quick bite, I would highly recommend a reindeer hot dog. That you actually have a coupon in your book for Tia, the lady at the not this one, but the one right before it. So really good, and it's always kind of fun. You can get it spicy or not spicy, and they're not too gamey, I promise. 1 block in front of us on 4th Avenue and D as in Dog Street is where we have the ceremonial start for the Iditarod, which starts right here on 4th Avenue, and it goes 1,100 miles to Nome. That race commemorates the serum run of 1925 when the citizens of Nome contracted diphtheria, and the only way to get the diphtheria serum to Nome was by dog sled. So a group of mushers got together and raced that serum 1,100 miles. They began to race the Iditarod in 1976 with just 6 mushers. Nowadays, over 60 will attempt the run. The grand prize is $75,000, but to keep a kennel of dogs fed, trained, and vaccinated for a year, you spend about $75,000. To your left-hand side is the Anchorage Hotel. Established in 1916, this was the very first hotel built in the city. It's still in operation. It is haunted, so if you want to hear some ghost stories, talk to the folks that were. John Sutter went down in history as the only man to race with a sled dog team of full-size poodles. He did. No one thought he would finish, but he did finish. Only 4 dogs were actually pulling when he crossed the finish line. He was pushing, and the rest of his dogs were sitting inside the sled. And to your left-hand side here is the Eisenhower Alaska Statehood Monument. Alaska became a state on January 3rd, 1959, and the president that signed the bill was President Eisenhower. We lovingly refer to this monument as Ike on the half shell. We are headed down the hill towards Ship Creek. That's S-H-I-P as in pumpkin, not to be confused with any other word. That's where the city of Anchorage was established in 1914. Now, for thousands of years, we were denying a fishing camp. But in 1914, 2,000 railroad workers were brought to Anchorage to help complete the Alaska Railroad. At the time, there weren't buildings here, so in those days, we were known as Tent City because the residents were living in large box white tents. In 1918, we voted on an official name. There were 3 names on that ballot: Anchorage, Alaska City, and Tent City. Can you guess which name won? It wasn't Anchorage, actually. No. No, the tent City, Yellowknife, no. Tent City was the number 2. So Alaska City was supposed to be our name. But when we sent word down to the post office in Seattle informing them that we would be known as Alaska City, the post office in Seattle sent word back that they had already given us the name of Anchorage and they weren't going to change it. And you don't mess with the post office. So we just said okay and carried on about our business. To your right hand side is the Alaska Railroad Depot. This is the original passenger depot built for Anchorage during World War II, and it's still in operation. So if you're going on a train trip, this is where you'll be leaving from. To your left is the very first engine that ever ran on the Alaska Railroad. This is engine number 1. They used to send these little guys out only going about 1 or 2 miles an hour. And their job was to bump the back ends of moose to teach them not to stand on the train tracks. So they used to call these little guys moose goosers. They finished construction on the Alaska Railroad in 1923, at which point President Warren G. Harding became the very first president to visit the territory. He was invited up to drive the Golden Spike in. Those early Alaska residents were so excited to have a U.S. president visit the territory, so they organized banquets at every stop along his 5-day train ride. Each banquet was complete with a different type of Alaskan cuisine, and they paired each meal with a fine wine made from wild berries. What those residents did not know at the time is that President Harding had a drinking problem. They fed his addiction for 5 days. By the time he got to the city of Nenana, where he was supposed to drive the Golden Spike in, President Harding was so inebriated that it took him 12 tries just to hit the Golden Spike on the head. Pretty embarrassing. How many of you folks came to Alaska or are leaving Alaska on a cruise ship of some sort? Okay, quite a few of you. How many of you are docked in the port of Anchorage today? A few of you? Okay, yeah. So you should know it's actually pretty rare. We only get one cruise ship about every other week here to Anchorage. Places like Seward and Whittier will get 2 to 4 cruise ships a week. We always ask why they're so rare here in town. The main reason is that the Cook Inlet, which is the body of water you sailed in through that surrounds the city of Anchorage, actually has the 3rd largest tide differential in the world. There's up to a 39-foot difference between high and low tide. So they have to be very careful when they're sailing in. They'll typically choose days where the tide is going to be the highest, and then the tide is in the morning. That way they can come in with the tide. The port is under a constant dredging process to make sure that it maintains its depth as well. So it can be pretty tricky for those cruise ships. And when the tide goes out on the Cook Inlet, it exposes the mud flats. And if you've walked along the shoreline at all today, you may have noticed the mud flats. They're actually created by glaciers. Now, as glaciers recede, they don't just melt, they pull backwards. And in that pulling process, they grind everything underneath them into a very fine powder called glacial silt. They originally measured the 64 quake at an 8.6 on the Richter scale. But that's as high as the Richter scale went to 1964. They estimate now that it was actually a 9.2, making it the 2nd largest earthquake ever recorded, 1st largest in North America. Not only was it a very large earthquake, it was very long, lasting 4 minutes and 28 seconds. Now, prior to the quake, this area of the city was a neighborhood called Turn Again Heights, and there were 77 homes built in this portion of the city. The ground was completely level with this parking lot all the way out about 1.5 miles to the bluffs. So you can see that right at the edge of the sidewalk, it takes a huge drop down. And feel free to stand up, folks, if you want to kind of peek over the edge there. Initial drop is about 25 feet, but if you look down in there, you'll see there are hills. Those hills are caused by the motion of the quake. During the 64 quake, the ground wasn't just shaking, it was rolling up and down and up and down, just like an ocean wave. Now, had it been a forest, not that big of a deal, but imagine what it would be like for your house to be thrown up and down on almost 10-foot tall wind waves for 4.5 minutes. There wasn't a single house livable in this neighborhood after the 64 quake. The houses right along the bluffs actually slid off the city and ended up in the mud flats, where they slowly sunk to the bottom. Downtown Anchorage was hit the hardest. We lost about 1,600 feet of coastline that day. 4th and 3rd Avenue used to run level. 3rd Avenue now runs at a gradual slope. And that's because the north side, the side opposite of City Hall, actually broke from the south side. So at G Street, they're level, but at A Street, there's almost 2.5 stories worth of difference between 4th and 3rd Avenue. The buildings on that far side of the street had to be completely rebuilt after the 64 quake. Now, what's amazing is that with all of that damage, Anchorage only lost 9 people that day. 7 people in this neighborhood. And they attribute that to the fact that it was Good Friday, because it was a holiday. Businesses had closed early for the long weekend. So by 5:30, there weren't many people in downtown Anchorage. And had it been a normal Friday, the death toll would have been much higher. JCPenney, which was the only department store at the time, bottomed out during the earthquake. So had it been filled with people, the death toll would have just been monumental. They did deem this land rebuildable. Not shockingly, no one chose to rebuild their house out here at Turnagain Heights. So they pulled all the debris out. You're not going to find foundations or anything out there now, but they've left it as a park. The trees have all grown up since the quake. If they had been here prior to the earthquake, they'd be growing in different directions. The outskirts of town. And that keeps them a safe distance away from the road. This particular fence has been put up to kind of keep the moose away from the airplanes. We've had a lot of problems in the last few years with moose and aircraft. male moose have antlers, and they grow a new set of antlers every year. And as the antlers are growing, there's a brown fur on them called velvet. And that velvet is what nourishes the antlers while they're growing. In the fall, moose will start to scratch their antlers against things, and eventually they'll shed their antlers and they'll grow a new set. Well, they've had a problem in this area with a particular moose who has become very fond of using the small airplanes as scratching posts for his antlers. Male moose weigh up to 900 pounds. That's a lot of weight getting shoved against the side of an airplane. In 2002, a female moose and her 2 calves made the front page of the newspaper because they walked through a hole in one of these fences and wound up out on the runway at the international airport. They spent several hours rerouting airport traffic to keep the moose safe, but every time they'd reroute the airplanes, the noise would scare the moose and they'd go running in the opposite direction, so it was a bit of a mess. Nowadays, to keep that from happening, the Fish and Game employs interns during the summer, and their entire job is to monitor the runways for wildlife. If a bear or a moose get too close to the runway, these interns have pellet guns that they're allowed to use to shoot at the bear or moose to get them to run back into the woods. Best summer job ever. If you are concerned about an encounter with a moose, you really shouldn't. We take moose safety very seriously, which is why in Anchorage it is illegal to ride a moose, and it is illegal to feed alcohol to a moose. So keep that in mind if you're going out tonight. We're coming into the Lake Hood Small Airplanes Airport. You're going to start to see a lot of different types of airplanes as we drive through here. Are any of you folks planning on taking a small airplane ride while you're in Alaska? Okay, a few of you. No, that would be a very long small airplane ride, sir. I don't think they'd make it to Hawaii. But if you have the opportunity, I highly recommend it. There's nothing more Alaskan than traveling by way of small airplane. 3/5 of the state of Alaska are only accessible by air during the summer months. And that's because of that tundra we were just looking at. You can't drive on the tundra, even with an ATV, and we have so few roads that these airplanes provide essential transportation. Kind of an interesting intersection here. Won't see too many of these where you're from. Notice underneath the stop sign is another sign that says aircraft crossing. Now, this is a taxiway, and it's not live right now since the gates are shut, so we're safe. But if the gates are open, we'd have to make sure that no airplanes are coming through here. My favorite sign is the next sign, yields to all aircraft. I don't know about you, but if I'm driving down the road and there's an airplane coming towards me, I'm not going to wonder who has the right-of-way before pulling over for it. The airplanes do have the right-of-way on the roads out here at Lake Hood and Lake Swinard, so it is not uncommon for us to have to wait for airplanes to cross the road before we continue on our route across the lake where the control tower is. That's the Ted Stevens International Airport. If you flew into Anchorage or you're flying out of Anchorage, that's our major airport in town. Ted Stevens was Senator of Alaska from 1968 until 2008. So he spent a long time serving Alaskans. He passed away in 2011. As you come down this straightaway, I want you to look at the tires on your left-hand side here. And if you compare from airplane to airplane, you'll start to notice that some of these airplanes have very large tires. These are what we call tundra tires or bush wheels. These bush wheels have been designed specifically for travel in Alaska because there are so many areas that rely on these airplanes that don't have paved roads, let alone paved runways. They've designed these tires to be able to take off and land from any solid surface. Muddy shorelines, real rough gravel, loose rock, uneven terrain. They're extremely difficult to puncture. But they're also extremely expensive. Depending on the size of the aircraft, they can cost up to about $3,000 per tire. But they're so durable that they'll last the life of the airplane. So pretty useful purchase. On the corner here is another interesting set of landing gear. This is a set of pontoon wheels. So it's pontoons for landing on water and then wheels underneath for landing on dry ground. That's a very heavy set of landing gear, so not any small airplane can use that. That particular set belongs to the airplane right next to it. That's a Beaver. The Havilland Beavers are some of the larger airplanes that operate out here. Now, they only made Beavers up until the late 80s. They made about 1,700 of them, but about 700 of them operate in Alaska. That one's for sale right now, about $700,000 for that aircraft. They're pretty pricey because they can carry lots of weight and they can carry it long distance, which is why they're so useful. Got an airplane coming in to land on the airstrip. They come right over top of us here. That's a little Super Cub. Aren't they cool? pretty. It does come with like a toy airplane, doesn't it? On your right-hand side, this little red airplane is what I call the ultimate Alaska package. This is a super cub, and we'll talk more about cubs in just a minute. This is a tail dragger, which means the third wheel's in the back of the airplane, not the front. It's got those great big Tundra tires on it. And then to top off the Alaska look, there's a mount for your rifle attached to the wing. Because Alaska, that's why. The only way that could be more Alaskan is if the rifle were attached with duct tape. Not quite sure where the water is. Now, it looks like he's headed to the canals. Don't worry, there is water back there. He's not about to run out of water. It's also harder to land because if you hit the water going too quickly when it's calm like this, it's like jumping on water, folks. They don't have rivers on airplanes, so.
Are airplanes light?
No. Airplanes on the water are what we call float planes or seaplanes or pontoon planes. They have pontoons for landing gear, which are basically canoes with rudders on the backs of them. The rudders steer the airplane while they're in the water. We do have over 3 million lakes in Alaska, so having a float plane is pretty useful for travel. And pontoons are priced by dimension, so it depends on how large the airplane is, how much they cost. It also depends on what they're made out of. He's got aluminum pontoons. Those are going to be a bit cheaper because they're heavier, so you need longer runways with aluminum pontoons. And then they make them out of fiberglass as well, which would be much more expensive. You can see that there are little rivets down the side. Regardless of what they're made out of, water lake. So a total of 1,100 airplanes call this airport home. The parking spaces are not privately owned. They are leased out by the city. It costs about $105 a month. That's a different. So it's actually pretty affordable. If you were to moor a boat in the harbor, it'd be several times that amount. They would need to start farms in Alaska, help clearing the land, and a monthly allowance until their farms got off the ground. For a family of 2, you receive $25 per month. A family of 3, $35. A family of 4, $45. And we're not sure if it was because of those long winter months without much to do, or the fact that they received more money per person. But in the first 2 years that the Midwest farmers were in the Mat-Su Valley, there was 139 children born to the 202 families. They quickly populated the territory. Those farms are known for growing some of the largest vegetables in the world. Have you heard of the big vegetables we grow in Alaska? Yeah? Just to give you an idea, the award-winning cabbage at last year's Alaska State Fair weighed in at 158 pounds. Just as a point of reference, that's twice my weight. They're also known for growing pumpkins that are 500-600 pounds. Zucchini is about as thick as your bicep. But what's amazing is our growing season only lasts about 90 days from frost to frost. But during World War II, at a time when lumber was hard to come by because all of the lumber was being diverted towards military projects, during World War II, islands in Alaska were invaded by Japanese. So during the war, we had a huge influx of military, and all of the lumber was being sent to build military buildings. To your right-hand side, you'll notice that all of these houses have the exact same design. Well, these were originally officers' housing during the World War II. It was not uncommon in those days for Anchorage residents to sneak onto those construction sites to steal lumber to build their homes with. Anchorage's population pre-World War was 8,000. Post-World War, 40,000.